The Chicken Asylum, an Alex Reynolds mystery. Author, Fred Hunter. Publisher, St. Martin's, Griffin, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 8. The next morning, Peter and I went out early to have a talk with Joe and Mickey. We'd met them when we were doing volunteer work for the senatorial bid of Charlie Clark, an escapade that ended so disastrously. I was pretty well assured that Peter would never press me to become civic-minded again. I'd found Joe Gardner pretty repellent at first. He was an overly intense, politically active stick of a man who dressed like a colorblind longshoreman, but his lack of fashion sense was far overshadowed by the fact that he oozed internalized homophobia. At least I thought he did. So I was astonished when he fell head over heels for Mickey Downs, a slight and inoffensive little guy who dressed like a 70s disco queen, and whose kids barely had a nodding acquaintance with the ground. Joe initially gave every indication that Mickey was everything he hated in a man, only to do a surprise about-face and fall into his arms, which goes to prove something about love, though I'm not sure what. Shortly after the end of the campaign, Joe and Mickey moved in together. Peter and I left at the crack of dawn to try to get to them before either of them left for work. Although if I remembered correctly, Mickey didn't have a job. But I was sure that Joe did. Probably. Easing world hunger, helling lepers. I was relying on Joe's social conscience as a means to leverage his help. We decided to take the L because Joe and Mickey lived in Boys Town, where it's notoriously hard to park. We also figured it would make it harder for anyone to follow us. I didn't know of any reason the feds would have to do that, but there's something about having a foreign fugitive curled up on your daybed that makes you feel like everyone is watching you. It's a short hop from Fullerton to Addison, and given the early hour and the fact that we were traveling in the opposite direction of rush hour traffic, both the platform and the train were nearly deserted, which made it easier to ensure that we weren't being tailed. Unless it was by a 300-pound white man with dreadlocks, whose lips never stopped moving. We got off the train at Addison and headed east. Joe and Mickey lived in a musty 3-flat on Halstead, directly across the street from Step Lively, one of the bigger dance bars. As we mounted the stone steps, Peter said, "You realize what this means?" I paused before ringing the doorbell. "What?" "We're going to have to break confidence." "What do you mean?" "If we explain to them what we want them to do, we're going to have to tell them that we work for the government." He was right. We never purposely divulged our part-time status as agents, although I had once done it accidentally in a fit of pique. However, as betrayed as I felt by our boss at that point, I didn't care. "Right at this moment, I don't feel a lot of allegiance to Nelson," I said as I pressed the bell. There was such a long wait before our ring was answered that I was beginning to think we'd missed them, when finally the intercom crackled. Someone tried to speak, then broke off and noisily cleared his throat. "Hello? Who is it?" "Joe. It's Alex Reynolds and Peter Livesey." "What?" His thoroughly surprised voice rattled from the tin box. "I'm sorry about coming here so early, but we have to talk to you. It's an emergency." There was a long pause, and he said, "All right," and buzzed us in. Once inside, we heard a door crack open overhead, and Joe called out, "Third floor." "Of course," I said to Peter. We mounted the stairs 2 at a time and soon reached the third-floor landing. Joe was standing in the doorway. He hadn't changed much since we'd last seen him, although his dark hair had receded a bit more. He was wearing a pair of navy blue pants and a light blue shirt, and he was donning a tie with red pinstripes as we approached. Although his outfit was not exactly outstanding, it was a sign that Mickey had been influencing him in the direction of color and coordination. "Do you know what time it is?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm sorry. I know this is a surprise, but it really is important. Can we come in?" "Sure." He was stepping aside so we could enter. As he closed the door, he asked, "What's the matter?" "Where's Mickey?" "He was just taking a shower." He looked down the hall and called his partner's name. "Just a minute." The familiar sing-song voice came from behind a door halfway down the hall. "Why don't we go in here?" said Joe, directing us into the living room. Mickey's influence was even more evident there. The wooden floor was polished to a shine. The furniture was attractively arranged, mountain cabin style, around a Fox fireplace, and books were neatly lined up according to size on the built-in shelves along the walls. On the mantelpiece, there was a framed photo of Joe and Mickey, both in tuxedos and smiling broadly as they sliced into a 4-tiered cake with a huge knife. Joe motioned us to seats and sat across from us. It was then that Mickey emerged from the hallway. His blonde hair was still buzzed and his slender body still taut. He was clad in an ankle-length robe of purple silk. In his hurry to join us, he hadn't dried himself off completely, which caused some embarrassing cleaning. "My God, I don't believe it!" Mickey exclaimed happily as he dropped in onto a chair next to Joe. "I don't mean this to sound rude, but what are you doing here? You're the last people I expect to see at this hour." "Who's the first?" Peter asked. He formed his lips into a tiny O. "Someone's mother." He gave a significant glance toward Joe. "She pops in unannounced from time to time at the oddest hours." He leaned forward and whispered conspiratorial, "She thinks we're sleeping together." And Joe laughed. "She's not that bad. She's a Trojan warrior." Joe reached over and lightly rubbed Mickey's head with the flat of his hand. I couldn't believe how this mismatched love had mellowed him. "So what's the emergency?" he asked. "Well," I began slowly with a glance at Peter. "First of all, what I'm about to tell you, we really need for you to keep it in the strictest confidence." "Do tell," Mickey said eagerly. Joe patted his knee. "That's fine. What is it?" "I know this will be a little hard to believe, but we sort of work for the government." This announcement was followed by a protracted silence, during which the two of them stared at me unblinkingly. "Uh-huh," they said in unison. "As well, secretly?" "Uh-huh. As sort of agents?" "Mm-hmm," said Joe. "It's true," Peter said with a nod. "I was glad he was there with me. He's a baritone. People believe them. You're the first people we've ever told about this, outside of the police. And we really need for you to promise us you won't tell anyone," I said. "Wait a minute," said Joe, finally animated. "You're serious?" "Yes, we are. We really can't go into it in detail. We just do some minor work for them. Just odd jobs." "Very odd," Peter added. They both looked completely nonplussed, for which I couldn't very well blame them. Joe said, "So what do you need with us?" "We need your help," I said. "You see, we were asked to take in this young man for a few days, and now we have to get him out of the house." "Stop feeding him," said Mickey. "That'll get rid of him." Peter looked at me. "I think it'll take a little more detail than that." I launched into an abbreviated version of the story, explaining that James was gay and fleeing his homeland. I didn't tell them what he was supposed to be providing in return. The real reason he was being allowed into the country. I did explain that we thought the government was using him, and that he'd accidentally run afoul of both the government agents and a group of terrorists from his own country, and that Mother had chosen to take him in. "Your mother's involved?" Joe asked incredulously. "Of course she is. She lives with us." "We live with her," Peter amended. "Boy, talk about a deviant lifestyle," said Mickey. "Anyway, now we have James at home, and our house is being watched. We have to get him out of there and to someplace safe." "You mean here?" said Joe. I shook my head. "No, we're going to keep him someplace else. We just need your help in getting him out." As I'd hoped, the idea of a gay man needing asylum and the prospect of political persecution won Joe over immediately. "What do you want us to do?" he asked. Hey, wait a minute, said Mickey, who'd gone quite wide-eyed and noticeably pale during my explanation. This sounds dangerous. I don't think so, said Peter. So far, the people from his country don't know where he is. We're actually only trying to get him past our own government agents. And, I said, smiling at Mickey, we especially need you. You're the key player in this little caper. He squealed with delight, which made me laugh. If Nelson didn't trust me when I was overly enthusiastic about getting involved in this, he would have fled at the sound that came out of Mickey. Cool, he said. What do I get to do? Well, there's something you told me when we were working on that Clark campaign. As I explained, Mickey grew increasingly excited, while Joe became very grave. You really think a stunt like that will work? He asked. That entirely depends on Mickey, I replied with a shrug. Damn straight. You should excuse the expression, said Mickey. I can do it. No, really, I can do it. Are you sure? Asked Joe. It's been a long time. Mickey gave him a broad grin. Baby, you never lose it. I'm making a comeback. Just don't overdo it, I said. So you want us to get him out of your house, and then what? Take him to where you're going to keep him? Joe asked. No, bring him here and let him change. I'm going to have someone come here and get him. Ooh. I don't think you know him, and it's better if we keep it like that. That way, if someone comes here looking for James, which, if all goes well, won't happen, you honestly won't know where he is. Ooh, clever, said Mickey, his eyes shining. I like this. Don't like it too much, said Peter, because you can never tell anyone about it. Damn, my greatest role and nobody will ever know. Peter and I left Joe and Mickey to make preparations for their roles. We set 7 o'clock after Joe got home from work as the time for the plan to go into action. Once we were back out on the street, Peter said, So, on to Stevie's place? Mm-hmm. He's just about 4 blocks from here. We headed west, and despite the urgency of the situation, I enjoyed the walk. It had rained overnight, and the air was deliciously cool and damp, and full of the aroma of wet foliage, quite different from the neighborhood where we lived, where light rain makes everything smell like a flooded basement. Peter said, I don't understand why you don't want James to stay with Joe and Mickey. I think he'd be safe with them. I want at least 2 degrees of separation in this. The guys guarding our house might be able to identify Joe and Mickey. If they can trace them, I don't want them to find James there. You realize, the minute our guards see Mickey leave, they're going to know something's wrong. Yeah, but by then it'll be too late. James will be long gone. Peter clucked his tongue. You know, you're beginning to think more and more like Nelson. I don't think I'm going to let you play with him anymore. At the moment, it's a good thing I can think like him. But why Stevie, of all people? Because he's helped us before, and because you know as well as I do that no matter how goofy he acts, he would help anybody in trouble. Are we going to tell him the whole story? Only if we have to. We had to tell Joe and Mickey because I didn't know how else we would have explained what we want them to do. But the fewer people that know the truth about us, the better. Especially Stevie, Peter said with a knowing smile. Yeah. Stevie answered the door clad in a pair of shiny black lounging pajamas, the top of which wasn't buttoned, revealing a beefy but toned chest covered with dark hair. He was a dead ringer for Tim Curry in his younger days, only a little less flamboyant. His bug eyes seemed less alert than usual when he greeted us. I'm sorry, boys, he said, waving us in with a flourish. I was just about to go to bed. At 8 in the morning, Peter said. I'm on 11 to 7 this week. I just got home, and I'm so tired I could bite the wind. Take a pew. Stevie lived in one of the older high-rises in the area, so his apartment looked roughly the same age as Joe and Mickey's, only with much smaller rooms. The pew he was referring to was a long old couch that faced a Kmart entertainment center. He draped himself over a chair beside us. "So, you're still at the hotel?" Peter asked. "Yes," he drawled. "And I'm just so fed up I could spit. Always switching my schedule. Always the same crap every day." "Sorry to hear it," I said. "You've been there a long time, though. Maybe that's why." "Too long. And then, what's there to do? You go out at night and see the same boring old queens everywhere you go." "Oops, sorry. No offense." "None taken. Anyway, surely you didn't come here at this ungodly hour to discuss my general way." "No. The other night when we ran into you at the bar, you said you weren't going with anyone at the moment. So, does that mean there's nobody staying here with you?" His nose wrinkled like a rabbit's. "That's right, Alex. I am alone. Sans husband, without partner, unattached, on my own, loverless, bereft, bedraggled, and bewildered. Did you just stop by to remind me?" No. We have a favor to ask," I said. "Ask away." "We have a friend who needs a place to stay for a little while." Stevie's eyes became more alert. He reached over to the occasional table a few feet from his chair and swept up a pack of Marlboro Lights and a lighter. He shook the pack and pulled a cigarette out with his teeth. Then he lit it and tossed the pack and lighter back on the table. "This friend can't stay in this big old house of yours?" "No, that's the problem." "And you want me to put him up?" "Yeah," said Peter. "It would really be a help to us if you could." He eyed us shrewdly. "The two of you want to stash a man over here on the QT, I take it." "That's right." He took a puff of the cigarette, dappling his pajama top with stray ash. "If I didn't know you two better, I would think you were involved in something a teensy bit sordid." We are, but not what you think," I said. "Does Mother Reynolds know what you're doing?" She's with him right now." "Look, Stevie, this is really important. This friend of ours, James, is in a little bit of trouble, and we need to hide him for a few days until we can figure out how to get him out of town." This got him to straighten up. "Until you can get him out of town? Sweet mother of Moses, what are you up to?" "It's just a little misunderstanding," I said. He said skeptically. "The police are looking for him." "The police?" Now his eyes were fully bugged out. "What'd he do?" "Nothing," Peter said quickly. "They don't want him because he committed a crime. They're just trying to find him, and we'd rather they didn't." "The police," Steve said again, taking another drag on his cigarette and sitting back in his chair. "Oh, God, the last time you asked me to help you, it was to break into a room at the hotel." "We just asked you for a key," I replied weakly in our defense. "I could have lost my job," he said, after giving it a moment's thought. He added, "Not that that would have been a bad thing, but then again, my sweet boys, it would have been a little hard to start a new life with a record, and I would look terrible in prison whites." "They don't wear white in prison," I said. "They wear orange." "Oh, delightful," he said, rolling his eyes. "I look like the gay pumpkin." "Stevie, if we thought this would be dangerous for you, we wouldn't ask you to do it," Peter said sincerely. "James really hasn't done anything wrong. They're not looking to arrest him." "Oh, of course not. They're just searching for him for the practice. Now, what in the name of my sainted Aunt Tilly is this all about?" "We just told you," I said. "Oh, please. You two want to stash someone who's running from the police in my apartment. This is a joke, isn't it? And I'm awfully tired." I looked at Peter helplessly. It had probably been foolhardy to think we could enlist Stevie's aid in something like this without divulging the truth, but I really had wanted to keep the number of people to know to a minority. Peter shrugged, which I took as a sign to go ahead. "Well, this is how it is." I gave him a much shorter explanation of our involvement with the government and our current mess. Then I'd given Joe and Mickey, carefully leaving out the bit about the terrorist for fear it would scare him off. When I was done, Stevie slid his leg back over the arm of his chair and took a couple more leisurely puffs on his cigarette, keeping his eyes leveled at me. You know, a simple none of your business would suffice. It's the truth. I'm usually a scrupulously honest person, so are both Peter and Mother, although they have a talent for lying very convincingly if the circumstances demand it. And that's a talent I don't have, so it's no wonder that nobody believes me when I lie. I've just never understood why nobody believes me when I'm telling the truth, either. Of course it is, sweetie, Stevie purred. Once again I looked to Peter, who responded with another shrug. So, I take it you're not going to tell me the real reason the guy needs to stay somewhere other than your house. And this time, I was the one that shrugged. Not other than what I've already told you. He sighed. Is he at least cute? You've seen him. He was the guy who was with us at the bar. His face brightened measurably. Really? For the first time, I could see why Nelson found undue enthusiasm suspicious. Yes, and he's been through enough. What's that supposed to mean? It means his entire world has just changed, so he doesn't need any more new horizons opened up at the moment, if you get my drift. He put his nose up in the air and put his fingers to his chest. Are you implying that I would have my saucy way with any man who spends the night here? His eyebrows suddenly flew up. Wait a minute. That didn't come out right. All I'm saying is James is in a very fragile state right now. He needs our help, and yours. Are you going to do it? All right, I'll do it. Why not? It'll be something different. I'm due for a change. Bring him on over. About that, I said. We need you to pick him up. Don't worry, it's from someplace very close by. I have to pick him up, too, he said with a fiend indignation. You can't deliver him. No, it'll only work if you'll pick him up. Do you know Joe Gardner or Mickey Downs? No, I smiled. Good. I'll give you their address. You'll be able to get James by 9 tonight. Or whatever you do, don't tell Joe or Mickey who you are. Oh, and one other thing. Don't call us unless it's an absolute emergency. They may be tapping our phone, and if you do have to call us, whatever you do, don't call us from here. Use a payphone. They may be tracing our calls. Stevie stared at me for a very long time, his face a mask of incredulous amusement. Do give it up, will you, sweetie? We had a very long wait until 7 o'clock that evening, made all the longer by having to fight the urge to look out the window. When your house is being watched, it's hard not to want to watch the watcher. It didn't matter that Frederick's men only meant to protect us, since we were preparing to scam them. It made them seem like our jailers. As I'd predicted, James was not at all happy with my plan. As new as he was to the ideal of sexual freedom, my scheme was definitely pushing his envelope. But he agreed to go through with it, mainly through Mother's reassurances that it was the right thing to do. Frankly, I was surprised that Mother had liked the plan so much. It seriously shook my confidence when she told me she wished she'd thought of it. We ate dinner at 5 o'clock to make sure that James had a good meal before leaving, but I barely touched my food. The butterflies in my stomach felt like bats. James' appetite, on the other hand, was unaffected. Although he did have the good grace to look concerned while he shoveled the food into his mouth. As the hour approached, it got more and more difficult to keep from looking out the window. Since I not only wanted to know if our guests were coming, I wanted to see if our guard was paying them any special notice. But to be seen peering out the window would have looked even more suspicious. Peter, James, and I sat on the couch, staring like stupefied puppets at the evening news on the television. I don't think any of us took in what we were seeing. Mother kept herself busy in the kitchen. It was about 5 minutes to 7 when the doorbell rang. Its double tones startled me into a spasm that nearly cost Peter a limb. Peter came out of the kitchen and headed for the door, but I got there first. I'll get it. I paused with my hand on the knob. Oh, God. I feel like the guy in The Lady or the Tiger. Except I know what it's going to be. I opened the door and found Joe standing on the stoop, with an arm around the waist of a young woman so striking she could have been an Egyptian goddess. She was wearing an eclectic blue dress with long sleeves and a high neck and a matching band that circled her forehead and disappeared under her long black hair. Her ears sported large blue hoops, and she had a huge satchel-like purse slung over her shoulder. "Hi, Joe," I said loudly. "Hi, Alex," he replied. "I don't think you've met my girlfriend. This is Marlene Du Bois." She held out her dark hand to me and in a deep, sensual voice said, "I am very pleased to meet you." I kissed the preferred hand, which seemed to be what was expected. Come in, come in." They went into the living room, and I closed the door. When I joined them, I said, "Jesus Christ, I'm surprised you didn't wear a veil." "You said not to overdo it," said Mickey from beneath the black wig. "Marlene Du Bois?" He laughed. "Of course, Marlene for Dietrich, and Du Bois for Blanche." "I hope you know the risk I was taking. I could get arrested for this, couldn't I?" "For going out in drag?" "No, silly, for going out in blackface. Isn't that against the law?" "This is hardly a minstrel show," I replied through curled lips. "Good Lord," Mother exclaimed, fairly glowing with delight. "You do make a lovely woman." "Doesn't he?" Joe said with pride. I was perfectly astonished by his reaction. When we'd first met him, he'd shown a marked disdain for drag, which was another one of the reasons I was so surprised when he took up with Mickey. The change that had come over Joe really was testament to the power of love. "Thank you very much," Mickey replied, "but I think this will be my swan song." "Whatever for? You look fantastic," said Mother. "It's been years since I've done this. These heels are murder. I don't think we've met. I'm Mickey Downs." She shook his hand. "I'm Alex's mother. Please call me Jean." "And I'm Joe Gardner," said Joe, shaking her hand in turn. "I'm very pleased to meet you both. It's so wonderful of you two to do this for us." Mickey gave a royal wave. "It's nothing." Alex explained the situation to us. "We had to help," and Joe said soberly. "Is this James?" "Yes," said Peter, bringing him over to them. James shook their hands, but said nothing. He seemed mesmerized by Mickey. Mother waved a hand up and down. "Mickey's costume. Do you think you'll be able to do this with him?" Mickey pursed his lips and looked James over. "It's a cinch. It'll be much easier to do him over. He doesn't need this damn body makeup." He took James's chin between his thumb and forefinger and turned his head sideways. "I got as near as I could to the shade from your description, Alex, but it's not a match. It's close enough. It'll be dark when they leave." He let go of James's face and then pulled the rings from his ears with a grimace. "These are clip-ons. I sort of figured he wouldn't have pierced ears." "Mickey thought of everything," Joe said. "We'd better get started," said Mickey, heading for the dining table, where he began to unpack his shoulder bag. "I'm going to need to take a shower to wash this muck off first." "That's fine. It's upstairs," said Mother. "I have my street clothes in here and all that stuff. I need to do his face. You can pack his belongings in this so he can take his own clothes with him." Mother picked up the now empty bag. "I'll get his things. I'll just get washed up. Then I'll slip into something a little less comfortable and get started on you, young man." And James turned his doe eyes to me. "Alex?" I shrugged and managed a smile. "It'll be fun." Once Mickey had cleaned up and changed into his usual attire, a t-shirt and jeans that both looked as if they'd been painted on, he had me bring a stool up to the hallway bathroom. He instructed James to take off his shirt and sat down on the stool, facing the mirror over the sink. He then opened a case that was lying on the counter and spread out its contents. It was a larger array of cosmetics than I'd ever seen outside of Marshall Field's. I didn't know what I need, Mickey explained when he saw the look on my face. He turned around, rested his butt against the counter, and considered James, whose face at the moment bore a striking resemblance to an attentive greyhound. The only thing lacking was the splayed ears. "Now that I see you," said Mickey, "I don't think it's going to take much. Your skin is fine. You've shaved your cute little face. I just have to powder you off so you don't shine. Then I'll do your eyes and lips. You'll look stunning." I sat on the counter and watched as Mickey worked. Although he'd said it wouldn't take much, he labored over James's face as if it were a canvas for over half an hour, and James stared at his slowly changing reflection with a deep sense of fascination. A few minutes into his transformation, he said, "Alex, why do you do this?" "We explained all that," I said patiently. "It's the only way to get you past the surveillance." "I do not mean this. I mean, why do you do all of this for me? You do not know me." I swallowed hard. "We're doing it because we want you to know that there are good people in the world. There are people who care about you. Peter and I and Mother, we care about you." James turned his eyes to Mickey, who was carefully lining his left lower lid. "Why do you do this?" He shrugged. "I wasn't busy tonight." "Mickey," I said warningly. He rolled his eyes. "All right, I'm doing it because you need help. When a guy needs help, this is what you do." He glanced at me and added, "You turn him into a woman." James turned back to me. "You risk your life for me. The Jihad Ahmad, if they find you, help me, they will kill you." "Don't worry about that. There's no way they'll find out about us. The Jihad are people who will want..." He searched for his word, but couldn't find it. "Revenge," I offered. He replied with gravity, "Yes, this is it. Revenge. If they think you help me, they will find you." Mickey slowed in his work and looked over at me with a great deal of concern. "Don't worry," I said to James. "They will find us." He looked extremely doubtful. "You do not know these people." There was a long silence, and he added to his reflection, "Because of me, there is much danger for you." "I know, but what else can we do? We have to help." His eyes brimmed with tears. Mickey yelled, "Shit!" and snatched a wad of toilet paper from the roll on the side of the counter. He pressed it carefully under James's eyes. "Look, it's all right to get all weepy on your own time, but don't do it now. You'll ruin my work." He dabbed James's eyes. Then, when it appeared that our soldier had regained control of himself, Mickey tossed the tissue aside. I noticed that Mickey was looking a bit misty himself. "Now, close your eyes," he said. "I need to do your lids." James complied, and Mickey went to work with a blue shadow that was a close match to the dress. "Alex," said James, "I still do not understand. You are against the government if you do this for me, but you are with the government." I hung my head and sighed. I knew what he was saying, and from time to time I'd wondered about it myself. The escapades in which we'd gotten involved had provided me and my loved ones with a lot of excitement, but this wasn't the first time I'd found myself wondering if we should have anything to do with them, despite the dimension they'd added to our lives, like jeopardy within myself. I had come to understand that there was more to our involvement than mere thrill-seeking. "James, I don't know if I can put this in a way that you can understand, because it's hard to explain. Our government, the American government, I mean, sometimes they're more interested in the ends than they are in the means." "What does this mean?" I sighed again, because it would have been difficult for me to explain how I felt, even to someone who spoke perfect English. "When our government, I mean like the FBI or the CIA, finds something bad happening, they try to do something about it. Sometimes they don't care so much about how they do that. In this case, they see the Red Jihad as a real threat to our security, and they want to do something about that. Along you came. They saw you as a means to find them. I don't think they realized the kind of danger that would put you in, Or maybe they did, and they just thought that finding the jihad was more important than your safety. So they used you. We've seen them do this sort of thing before. I don't think they just do this with gay people. I think they would use anyone. You can open your eyes now, said Mickey. He did, and turned them on me. But if they use people like this, how can you be with them? I took a deep breath. Because of the look on your face when we took you to Charlene's for the first time. I do not understand. We have a lot of problems here, I said. A lot of problems. But we're still free. You saw that yourself when we took you to Charlene's. For all the stuff that's wrong with our government and our country, we're still better off here. I may think the way they're used you is despicable, but at the same time, the Red Jihad is the threat. They do have to do something about them, even if I don't agree with the way they're going about it. So I guess the answer to your question is that me and my mother and Peter are with the government because somebody has to keep them honest. If you're done singing Yankee Doodle Dandy, said Mickey, I have to do his lips. Just before Mickey started, James said, but you're Mr. Nelson. Does he think as you do? Lips together, Mickey ordered, and James complied. Larry, I could feel a dark cloud passing over me. I don't know what he's thinking right now. There's a lot he needs to explain, but Mickey was smoothing the color over James's lips with the pinky of his right hand. When my voice trailed off, he paused, and James looked at me. But what? I raised my eyes to him. But I have to believe he's one of the good guys. Mickey wiped the red off his finger and tossed a tissue onto the ever-growing pile on the counter. He then took up a pencil and carefully ran it along the outlines of James's lips. When he was done, he stepped back and surveyed his work. There. Doesn't that look exactly like I did? But what do you think? It's close enough to pass in the dark. Now let's do the wig. He gathered it up from beside the sink and fitted it onto James's head, pulling it down and shifting it into position. This, said Mickey, picking up the blue headband. I'll bet you thought it was just for decoration, but it's not. He slipped it onto James's head, across his forehead and under the back of his hair. It has a dual purpose. It's tight enough to make sure the wig stays in place, and the way it covers the front. You see? It makes him look even more generic. Viola. I had to admit he had successfully transformed James into a near copy of himself. Mickey stepped aside so that James could see the end result in the mirror. I was worried about how he'd react, but I certainly didn't expect what happened. For a moment, he didn't appear to recognize himself, as if he were looking through a glass at someone else instead of his own reflection. Then his lips curved into a smile, and at last he broke into laughter. I was stunned to realize it was the first time I'd heard him truly laugh. Mickey gave me a puzzled smile and shrugged. Now we've got to get you dressed. Slip out of your things. I'll take them to Mother, I offered, preparing to give them some privacy. I picked his shirt up from the counter as he stripped off his pants. He gave them to me as Mickey held up a rather skimpy undergarment that looked like a thong and appeared to be the consistency of a girdle. What is this? James asked with a dubious frown. That, my dear boy, is a gaff. It'll tuck everything away nicely and see that you don't go poking through my lovely dress. I'm afraid your shorts will have to go too. And James hesitated a moment and then stepped out of his brace. Oh my God! Mickey gasped. I don't think the shoes are going to fit. James handed the briefs to me and took the gaff from Mickey. When he started to step into it, Mickey stepped him and turned it around. This way. We only want you to be a woman for a little while. I left the bathroom and took the clothes to Mother, who was waiting in James's room. These have seen better days, she said, eyeing the ragged briefs as she began to fold them. How's he doing? Better than I thought. We may have found him a new career. Where's Peter? Downstairs with Joe, she said as she neatly folded the clothes. Honestly, this is the craziest of ideas. It's something coming from you. Oh, I'm not being critical, darling. I'm proud of you. I'd always hoped to make you proud by coming up with a vaccine or bringing about world peace, not for turning an Iraqi soldier into a Nubian princess. Well, she said, putting the pants into his bag, we all have to make our mark in our own little corner of the world. I laughed. I'll go see if they're finished. Back in the bathroom, the transformation was complete. James was in the dress, and Mickey was adjusting the sleeves. How's it going? I asked. Mickey stepped back. Well, you told me he was about my size, but he's a little thinner. He doesn't fill the dress quite as well as me. He doesn't have my childbearing hips. And he's a tiny bit taller. I hope they don't notice the bit of hair that's showing down there, but all in all, I think we have a match. James turned to me. It's okay. Mickey was right. The dress hung more loosely on James than it had on him, but with a little darkness and a little distance. I didn't think anyone would notice the difference. It's more than okay. It's great. James looked in the mirror and smiled at himself. Okay. Oh, what about the shoes? I asked Mickey. His feet are much bigger than mine, as I guessed, he said ruefully, which will work to his advantage. The shoes won't fall off. Of course, he might break his ankles. Let's keep a good thought, I said wryly, and then added to James, maybe you should take them off before going downstairs. It's okay, he said, taking a few tentative steps forward. No, he'd better not, said Mickey. There's 4 steps outside your house. He should try them on the stairs to get used to navigating them before going outside. James was only slightly wobbly as we walked him down the hallway. He moved carefully, but not too slowly, which actually made his gait seem rather regal. At the stairs, he grasped the banister with his right hand and went down the steps, 1 foot after the other, maintaining his balance so skillfully it was hard to believe it was his first time in Hales. Peter and Joe were seated on the couch and rose when they saw him. You look great, Peter said encouragingly. Look how well he's doing on the hills, I said. James reddened slightly. It's not so much different from army training. Really? Joe said with surprise. Yes, it hurts, but it must be done. Mother came downstairs with the shoulder bag and smiled with wonder at the sight of James. You look smashing. Here's your purse. Thank you. He slipped the strap over his shoulder. Your duffel bag and all of your other things are in there. There was a short silence, then she added, Well, it's no use standing about. We'd better get on with it. Yes, said James hesitantly. But I thank you. Nobody do so much for me before. That's quite all right. Mother put her arms around him, and he held her tightly for several seconds. Look, you, said Mickey. Don't you start blubbering again. You ruin your makeup, and I'll be forced to kill you. He released Mother, then hugged Peter and me in turn, very nearly cracking our ribs. We walked him to the door, and as Mother opened it, Joe said, Put your arm through mine. Like this, he demonstrated, and James followed suit. Stay back, I said to Mickey. They can't see you yet. Okay, he replied, a bit disappointed. Mother stayed by the door, and Peter and I stepped out onto the stoop and watched as Joe and James went down the stairs. James faltered only once when they reached the walk, but regained himself almost immediately. We called our goodbyes as they headed for the L. Mother went back into the house, and Peter and I followed her after a moment. I closed the door and said, He came in a soldier and went out a drag queen. I think our work here is done. Not by half, said Mother. As prearranged, Mickey waited at our house for an hour before leaving. When the time came, he said, I haven't been this nervous about walking down the street since I had to go past Wrigley Field at night. Not in drag, I exclaimed. No, in baseball season. Just act naturally. Everything will be all right, said Peter. Mickey grimaced comically. Exactly what my mother used to say. We didn't see him off at the front steps because we figured the less attention we drew to his exit, the better. Once he was gone, Mother heaved a sigh. Such a bother having company. I love having people here, but it's always nice when things return to normal. Normal, I said flatly. Yes, why don't we have some tea and figure out how to smuggle our accused terrorists out of the city? Good idea. Off she went to the kitchen. I looked at Peter. I was being facetious. She knows that, honey, he replied with a smile. We followed her into the kitchen, where she was already filling the kettle with water. Actually, she said as she turned off the tap, the means of getting him out of town isn't really a question. I already have that figured out. I should have known, I said. How? By car, of course. I'm sure Agent Fredericks will have people watching the airports, train stations, and such, but now that James is away from our house, we should be able to drive him out of the city quite easily. You think so? She placed the kettle on the stove and turned an indulgent smile on me. Darling, despite what some writers would have you believe, Chicago is not a small English village. They can't very well put up roadblocks at both ends of the city and stop every car that comes through. What we have to do is decide where to take them. You mean who to take them to? Said Peter, because he'll need someone to take care of him at least for a while. Quite right, Mother said vaguely. She sounded as if she was already running this through her mind and was distressed that a solution wasn't more forthcoming. As the discussion wore on, our options dwindled. Surprisingly enough, it's difficult to come up with someone in the normal course of one's life who'd be willing to take in a foreign fugitive and instruct him how to live in the new world. Every possibility was brought up and shot down. Peter first suggested housing James at least temporarily with his parents or his sister in California, but we realized at once that the first place the feds would look for him would be among our relatives. Then we dredged up the names of every friend and acquaintance we'd ever had outside of Chicago, but each one was negated in turn for a variety of reasons. At last, Mother heaved an exasperated sigh. I think we should sleep on it. Maybe we'll come up with something in the morning. You don't have any ideals, I said with shock. You're going to have to resign as head of Lucy Ricardo Incorporated. Go to bed, dear, she said flatly. Peter and I went to our room and undressed. In the distance, I could hear the faint click of mugs knocked together as Mother cleaned up the tea things. She could never go to bed while something was out of place in the kitchen. Aside from that, an overpowering stillness had fallen over the house. Mother was right. No matter how little trouble guests may be, they unsettled your home while they visit, even if it's just that their breathing is creating unfamiliar ripples in the air. I think that's what causes that weird sense of ennui you get when company leaves. It's not so much let down as relief, and James had brought with him a few more problems than the ordinary guest. We climbed into bed together, and Peter leaned over and gave me a gentle kiss. When our lips parted, he drew back slightly and furrowed his brow. What's wrong? He asked. Oh, I was just thinking, I wish there was some way that Joe and Mikey could have let us know that they got James home all right. Peter tilted his head. I'm sure they did, if just from the negative standpoint. What do you mean? If something had gone wrong, we would have heard about it by now. That's true. Is that all that's bothering you? No, I'm still worried about where we're going to send him. He sighed. You should try to put that out of your mind and get some sleep. We're all too tired to think. He started to lie back against his pillow, but stopped. He brought his face close to mine and scrutinized it. Are you sure that's all you're worried about? No, I replied. I was just thinking about a talk I had with James while Mickey was fixing him up. Yeah? Do you ever regret getting involved with Nelson and the government? Only when I'm trying to get my sleep. No, really. He laid his head back on my chest and was silent for a very long time. I could almost hear the wheels and gears clicking in his head. I knew that Peter had had some serious issues with the way some of this work of ours had panned out, but I'd always believed, or wanted to, that on a gut level he believed in what we were doing. At least, enough to go along with it. I was just beginning to think he wasn't going to answer when he raised his head slightly and looked at me. Really? He asked. Yeah, I want to know. Do you ever regret it? No, he said after a beat. Then he laid his head back down and quickly fell asleep. Even though I was exhausted, I still couldn't sleep. I lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Peter softly whistling through his nose and thinking about what James had said would happen if the Jihad ever found us. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.